everyone, it's Shel C from PaperOcotilloStudio. Today I am here sharing with you a project that I made for the StencilGirl Creative Team. The challenge for January was to either frame it or to fill it with circle shapes. And those were our options. I decided to do both because why not? I wanted to play with dark and light and the idea of tones ranging from white to black with all the grays in between, and combine that idea with circle shapes, interesting shapes inside of circle shapes, and then also contrasting that a bit with some rectangular or square or straight line shapes. So the first thing that I'm doing here is I have a 12 by 12 canvas, and I am using black gesso and white gesso, and I started with the black in one corner and I'm going across diagonally and then trying to blend through grays and blend into white in the other corner. So once that was all dry, then I started to stencil. The first stencil that I'm using is Circles by Tracy Bautista. This is one of my favorites. You can see that it is because it's completely covered with paint. It's got so many layers of paint on it. It's so thick, but this is a great stencil. It's abstract while still giving you a shape and an idea of what it is. It just looks like she took some markers and went and made a lot of circles around circles, and then made that into a stencil, and it's a great design. It's one of the first ones I got from StencilGirl, and I just still love it. I use it a lot. So where the black gesso is, I'm using titanium white paint, and this is the titanium white fluid paint from Deco Arts. It's called Deco Art Media Fluid Paint. And so in the black area, I stenciled with white, and in the white area, I'm stenciling with black, same type of paint, a fluid paint. And I'm using these sponge daubers that I ordered off of Amazon. There's several different sizes in a pack, and then I got a lot of packs with inside a pack. So I have a lot of them. And when I'm done using them, I just throw them in water so that they don't get all hard and crusty. And I can just reuse them after rinsing them out. So the tricky part is what to do in the gray area. So I mixed a little bit of white and black together, and I started stenciling in that gray area with a lighter gray, and then I'm going to need to just keep kind of blending and blending until everything looks cohesive. Of course, the stencil is a 9 by 12 size, and the canvas is a 12 by 12, so I do have to move the stencil around and try to realign it in different areas. It doesn't overlap. It's not one of those ones that you could overlap it, but it's close enough that you can get it, a design all over the entire canvas of these circles within circles within circles. Circle shapes are used so often in art. I see them in all kinds of art. This is kind of an abstract piece, but they could certainly be used to create more concrete things, balloons, bubbles, all those type of things. I was just trying to more play with tone and shade than I was to worry about this looking like a specific thing. So once I had my first layer of stenciling done pretty well with going from dark to light, then I wanted to put some other stencil shapes within inside of the circles. So I have another stencil here. This one is S008 Circle 6 by Michelle Ward. And it has some almost kind of like a mandala design. It's got sort of a flowery shape in the center and then spokes coming out. Kind of reminds me of a sun image. Interesting stencil. And this is, of course, a smaller size 6 by 6. So I can layer that stencil over the other circles, trying to center it as well as I can. And then I can put the other stencil over the top and layer the stencils one on top of each other so that I get that mandala design with inside the other circle. Of course, these circles by Tracy Bautista are not perfectly circular. So it does sometimes get a little bit wonky, but I'm happy with that. The other stencil, the smaller stencil that I'm using, is S709 Spoked Wheels Collage by Jennifer Evans. And I am just alternating some black paint, some white paint, some mixture of white and black to make a gray, trying to add pattern and interest inside of all these circles and stack all these circles one on top of each other. Sometimes I stack the stencils so that I don't go over the edge, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just take the stencil right over the top. I do have a little bit of trouble with getting too much paint. Remember, I'm using a fluid paint and I'm getting a little bit too much soaked into my sponge dauber thing, and I am getting some blobby stenciling. So perhaps I should have used a different tool or been more careful about blotting off, you know, uh, sponging it off onto my palette before I go right into the stencil. But that's okay. I plan to do pen work anyway, so I'm not too concerned about it, but you can see that there's some places where the fine detail of the stencil, it got lost because I had too much paint on my sponge dauber. So that's just something to keep in mind when you go to get more paint or re-ink your sponge. Just make sure that you pat it a few times across your palette in a drier area so that you can get that fluid paint off the sponge and then it won't go under the stencil as much. Also, you could use a stencil adhesive such as Pixie Spray to really make the stencil lay down on the canvas very well, and then you wouldn't have any bleed under or very little, but I was just too much of in a hurry to do that. So then I have these two other smaller canvases. These are canvas boards, and I want to play with that idea of framing and also maybe give the canvas a little bit of height and interest. Just something I wanted to do. So one of them was already painted black with gesso and the other one was white. And I used the L071 Random Circles stencil by Mary Beth Shaw. This is a large one. To stencil the background of my white one. And I started in the corners with dark paint and then mixed it a little bit with white and gradually went towards the center from the two opposite diagonal corners to tone this canvas. And then I'm using the same process of using the spoked wheel collage and the circle 6 to put some pattern and interest inside of these circles that I've stenciled on with the random circle stencil. And then I want to make sure that the edge is very dark on this one because it's going to be layered on top of the other one, the larger one. So I took my black paint and sponged around the edges with the dauber and made sure that all the edges of the canvas were painted black. Then with the smaller black one, it's even smaller than the other one, I stenciled with white using the circle one again, and then went over it with circle 6. And I decided that I didn't really like the way the edges were on it, so I ended up using some black paint to just paint all the corners after I do this pen work. So this is what I'm talking about. The rest of this video is pen work and also assembly. So I've got a fine tip white Posca pen, a fine tip black Posca pen, a larger tip of the Sharpie water-based, so that would be an acrylic pen. These are all acrylic paint pens. I have the black in the large size of the Sharpie brand, and then I also have a chalk marker, which I can't remember the brand right now, but it's an unusual off-brand white fat-tipped chalk marker, and that's what I'm going to do all my detailing with, those 4 markers. And make sure that you shake them well so that the paint inside is mixed up and you get the most opacity from the paint, particularly the white ones. They really need to be shaken up. Shake it, shake it, shake it, so that you get good opacity. So this is where I decided I didn't really like having all that stenciled stuff around the edges pretty soon here. It looked messy, and I wanted to just have that circular and flower shape in the center, and that's all I wanted. So I painted around the edges to get rid of that extra over stenciling stuff around the edges, and it looks a lot better. So I'm doing the same type of detail pen work to the next size up canvas using these 2 fine markers, and then I'm also going to do it on the 12 by 12 as well. Not retouching every single thing that I do, every single stenciled bit, just enough that it looks like I have added my own touch to the stencil work. When you're using stencils, you should use them as a tool to make marks, and then go ahead and make your own marks in addition so that it becomes your artwork and not just the stencil designer's artwork. Of course, the way that you use the stencil in your own unique style also makes it your art. But I really think of stencils as a tool and not the end of the art, just something that gets you there. So adding your own marks with acrylic markers or something else, whatever you do, does make that art more yours. So I'm still working on that. I decided to make this upper corner look more like this circle stencil. It was actually stenciled with the random circles, which are a lot more uniform, but I wanted to make it have that kind of interesting, as if you'd taken a marker and just randomly made circles around circles around circles. I like the look of that. So I did that with my marker on that upper corner so that it would coordinate better with my little black canvas that goes on top. And then I keep putting the little one on top of the other one so that I know which portions of the canvas that I don't have to do pen work because it's going to be covered anyway. So those 2 little canvases are done. I decide where I want to place it, which ends up being in the corner that was originally white. I draw a line around it so I know where it's going to be framed, and I don't have to worry about pin work underneath that spot because, of course, it's going to have a canvas over the top of it. So why go crazy with it? So I start working my pins around that area. There was some kind of blotchy stenciling down there that I needed to touch up a little bit, where I had got too much paint on the sponge and made it a little bit bloppy. And I'm tracing around the stenciling on this Circle 6 by Michelle Ward, the design. I'm tracing around the design on some of those so that it really stands out more, especially over the gray. If the white is stenciled over the gray, it looks best if I go around it with a black line, just to make it kind of stand out more from the background. And like I said before, I don't do every single one. I don't go around every single thing. I want some of them to look more like they're in the background and some of them to look like they're in the foreground. So doing the pen work brings them to the foreground. And that's what I wanted to do. Here's where I bring in the larger tip of the black, which is the Sharpie water-based marker. It's much larger, fatter pen than the small fine tips that I have from Posca. I love all types of acrylic markers. They are my favorite. I decided to use that to make the frame around the canvas that I'm going to put on there a little bit wider. So I did that, and then I decided, oh, what I need to do is go around the edges of the canvas because I want to paint all the canvas edges black. I decided, so I want to make sure that there's a definite line. And this is part of my framing idea of framing things inside of things, and making boxes around things. That's pleasing to me. That type of look makes me happy to have things contained inside of lines. I probably am more of an illustrator brain than I am good at doing abstract things. I really like having lines around things, and so being able to frame in these circles within these rectangles, I think is very, very interesting and fun to look at. So I'm continuing to touch up and redefine lines and make more marks with my pens. I don't show you every single second of it. This canvas project took me about 3 hours to complete, so there's no way that I could condense 3 hours into 20 minutes video, even with the speeding. So you're not going to see me make every single mark, but just so you know that I did make marks all over this thing to make it more my art. Drawing around things, making dots, making, I don't know, just marks. I did also, I guess I forgot about this one. I got out a medium tip gray Posca pen that came in a set of medium tips as well, just to use that a little bit because we are supposed to be going from dark to light and light to dark, and there's so many shades of gray in between. So I did use a gray marker too. I forgot about that one. Sorry. So I'm having fun doing this. This type of mark making is relaxing to me. I don't feel like I have to draw a thing. I'm just making dots and circles and lines, and it's something that I could sit and do it for hours. It's kind of like Zentangling, except for I'm not having to draw my own shapes. The Zentangle shapes actually stress me out a little bit because I'm not sure what I'm doing. So I decided I wanted a second frame around my framed area because it didn't quite stand out as much as I had hoped since it's all the same colors. So I used that fat marker and draw a frame around the other lines. And then I use the fine tip white and go and make kind of like a beveled edge on the inside of that frame with the white. And that looks better. Now you can really see it coming out from the background and standing out. So to attach my canvases, I use this, it's carpet tape that you can buy at a home store, but it's foam and it has sticky on either side. So I cut it to shape, and then before I put it on there, I make sure that I take that marker and make all the white tape edges go away so that when you see it from an angle, you don't see a bunch of white underneath. I think that looks better since all the edges of the little canvases are black. And then I do the same thing with the other one and then attach it onto my larger 12 by 12 canvas. And then I do, the last thing I do is just a little bit of splattering with some black and then some white paint. I just think splatters are interesting and they're so random, you can't control them. So I did that a little bit around just to finish up my piece. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Remember, these are all StencilGirl stencil products, and I'm doing this for their creative team. I am enjoying this a lot. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, leave a comment or question below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on your notification bells. And of course, you can share this on Pinterest or on Facebook if you'd like to. That helps our channels grow by having videos shared and liked and commented on. That's it for me. Thanks. Bye-bye.